Ever wondered if a relationship can survive infidelity? Once a cheat, always a cheat. We've all heard it. In this episode, I sit down with certified therapist Dr. Deborah Miller, who says it doesn't have to end that way. She shares 5 powerful steps to make a real apology after an affair. And if you're the one who was hurt, she explains how to begin healing and learning to trust again. So, if this is your story or someone you know, this episode might be the starting point of something new. Let's dive in.
The person that cheated needs to have some second chance.
What typically drives someone to cheat?
Sometimes it's just happenstance, a non thinking, more of a physical reaction. The reasons vary, but the real question I always ask is why does someone continue to cheat?
Do men cheat more than women?
I think more men statistically are guilty, whether it be porn, whether it be chatting with the old high school girlfriend or boyfriend. If it's not shared with your primary partner, then that's falls under my definition of an affair.
Can a relationship go back to what it was before the affair?
The relationship will change fundamentally forever. The two people have to decide, how do we as a couple want to be different? People can change.
Hi guys, so before we get into the episode, I have a little huge favor to ask of you. Over the years, I've learned that closed mouths don't get fed. So this is me opening my mouth with the hopes that you'll feed me to stupor. If you as little as enjoyed this show, please like, share, and subscribe. It gives me the extra motivation that I need to keep going because I really want to be doing this for a very, very long time. Okay, thank you. Let's get back to the show. Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Mory. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so today we're discussing a very controversial conversation that is affecting, I feel like, a lot of people, but it's also a very touchy subject that a lot of people don't want to dive into, but it's also a very necessary subject. I feel like there's more light that needs to be shared on infidelity because there's a large amount of relationships that fail due to this. So I'm sure a lot of relationships will benefit from this. So I wanted to start by asking you, what typically drives someone to cheat, and is it always about like dissatisfaction in the relationship? What makes a person cheat?
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple reasons why someone would choose to violate trust in a relationship and cheat and have a secret relationship. Of course, um, one might be that the primary relationship isn't that great and they're looking elsewhere to get their needs met. Um, but sometimes it's just happenstance. They're on a trip traveling away and there just happens to be this person and they're available and it's a non-thinking, more of a physical reaction. Um, it could be a friendship that started and then got crossed a line, got too intimate. Um, but that the reasons vary. But the real question I always ask is why does someone continue to cheat? Why do they continue their affair relationship? What, why, surely they get that the other person in their partner is being hurt, even though they may not know what's happening.
Oh, wait, so when your partner is cheating on you, you still get hurt without you knowing?
Well, yeah, it's very subtle. They may not know why their partner is pulling away, why they are acting different, why they're spending more time away, and they get suspicious perhaps, but sometimes people are so busy or their relationship is such that it's not intimate and therefore they don't really notice that the other person, their partner isn't um, interacting with them the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there cases where the cheat is such a pro cheater in a way where the partner doesn't suspect a single thing?
Well, I think it's interesting now with technology. It's tougher to cheat in the sense that you can check someone's phone, you can check you know, your credit card statements, you can check your location. It's tougher, but yeah, that's the part that's when talk to people who decide to be honest about their affair, about their cheating, their infidelity, they kind of feel relieved when they have been found out, because it takes a lot of work
It
to
does.
try to
I can
hide.
imagine how much work it will take, to
Yeah.
it. And that's why I always pity the aggrieved party because it takes effort to get into the car. You have like the whole stretch to think about it and turn back and not do it,
Yes.
but then you still go ahead. And I feel like that can damage the trust of any relationship. So is it true that once the trust is broken, it can never fully be rebuilt, or have you seen couples come back strong from the?
I have seen couples really repair it, and it takes both sides with a desire to repair it. And people may choose to stay in a relationship, one, because they may feel like the person that cheated really truly is remorseful and will make change. But they also may stay in the relationship because of financial or because of children. Um, it's hard to say. So the hard part is though that our cultures, including your culture too, we judge people who have affairs, and we pretty much say to the person that's been cheated on that they should probably leave, that there's no hope. And that's why I wrote this book, More Than Sorry: 5 Steps to Deepen Your Apology After You've Committed Infidelity, because I feel like the person that cheated needs to have some second chance. It may or may not work out in that relationship, but they still need to make some change within themselves for future relationships, if not this one that they're currently in. Yeah.
So am I obligated to forgive somebody who cheated or give them a
There's no
second chance?
obligation. Yeah, there's no obligation. It's really the work that the person, the cheater needs to make. The cheater needs to work on their empathy, their compassion, their honesty, their vulnerability, their intimacy, their openness. All that is done without any guarantee that they will be forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
It that we don't know how it will be received, but to just give up and not try doesn't help anybody grow and change and make and be different.
So you have to be willing to do all of that despite not knowing whether or not your efforts will be accepted, and you have to be okay with the fact that your efforts or your apologies might not be accepted.
Yeah, and that's tough because um, yeah, I had one client I talk about in the book that he got so angry that he kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I won't do it again," and his wife wouldn't drop it, kept asking more questions, wanted to rehash it, and so it has to be talked about. It has to be discussed. Not necessarily how many times did you sleep together or how many times did you go out to dinner or
But
cheat.
should we ask those questions?
Yes,
Oh my
people are
god.
curious.
Oh my god. That would totally.
Well, yeah, but then that gets stuck in their head. I mean, they should get to ask the questions, and the cheater should answer them. But then after a time period to rehash it, then it plants an image in the wounded, I'm calling the person that got cheated on, the wounded person's head, that they will have a hard time erasing. If they were all only imagine them, naked in bed together, it's going to be really tough for them to, yeah, your face says, I can't, how do I not think about that?
Yeah.
Um, so it's a two-way street. The cheater has a lot of work to do, but the wounded person also has work to do about what is forgiveness? How do I get there? Of course, you'll never forget, but how do you trust that this is in the past and that you can grow from it? And there always is something that the couple can grow from. What was going on in their intimacy? How close were they? How open were they? And so that's the challenge of the therapist, how not to get stuck of fixing the marriage when you first have to fix or repair the pain from the affair.
Hmm.
You have to spend time there first before you can then say, well, tell me about your marriage. What areas do you think you need to work on? When couples would come to me, usually with this as a presenting issue, my husband or wife cheated on me, and I don't know why, and so the person that was violated really needs a lot of attention, a lot of time to process it, a lot of time to vent their frustration and upsetness. And so typically what I would see is that the person that cheated you just kind of be a shrinking violet, just be really quiet, you know, maybe hang their head, just didn't have much to say, except for, I don't know why I did it. I won't do it again. And I realized at that point that so much of what's the support is for the person that was hurt. And it should be. But there also has to be, if the couple, two-way street makes repair, both parties need help.
Hmm. So you're saying the cheat also needs help, and
Yes.
we should award them
Yes.
some level of sympathy.
Well, sympathy means you feel sorry for them, pity them. Yeah, I mean, their lives changed too, but that doesn't mean you forgive them. The sympathy, the empathy would be communicating that you get how hard it is for them to make change and to confess what they've done and repair it. It's hard work.
What?
It may or may not happen.
I'm thinking of a case where they didn't confess and they were caught. How do you
Yeah,
navigate such scenarios?
that happens a lot because people are pretty naive when they're doing something wrong. They're like, oh, I'm not hurting anybody. No one will ever know. And then bam, they get caught. Because there's the shock value, the hurt value, the violation of trust, all those factors. And so the person that cheated has to develop the skill of empathy because typically, you remember as a kid when you would get in trouble, our first reaction is to be defensive. Yes, but I didn't mean to. Yes, but it was the other kid's fault. Yes, but it's not a big deal. So the skill of empathy is for the cheater to be able to say, wow, I really broke your heart. I really blew your mind by sneaking off and doing this thing that you had no idea was happening. And you have to learn the skill of communicating empathy um, without getting stuck in your own defensiveness.
So what do you think? What are some of the first steps that a person should do immediately after an infidelity is discovered, emotionally,
Um,
practically? Like, what are the first set of things that should be done if you want to keep the relationship?
well, first of all, you don't have to make that decision right away if you want to keep the relationship. You can talk and start the process of being more open with each other, talking about what happened, talking about what needs to happen, and you may or may not continue the relationship. Again, no guarantees. That's the hard part. So this empathy word, I don't mean to keep bringing it up, but it's really, really a necessary skill. And when I say skill, it's not only learning how to sense what the other person's feeling, but to find the right words to say. How are you at empathy? I bet you're a good interviewer. I can tell you know how to do this.
Say that again.
I said, I bet you're good at empathy.
Yeah,
I can
I
tell
am.
by.
I am. I feel
Mhm.
well. I do okay. I do okay when it comes to that. But according to your books or your statistics, do men cheat more than women, or is there a balance?
Um, yeah, statistically, it's really tough to find really good numbers because who's going to raise their hand and admit they had an affair? Because typically, if an affair happens, yes, it may be blasted all over the community and within the family, but more often it's kept a secret, even between the couple, because they don't want to ruin their relationship. What if they repair it? Now, 20 other people know what happened, and now they're included in this repair. It gets a little messy with that. But yes, I think more men um, statistically are guilty. But I think we have to remember that when I define affair, it's yes, it's having a physical relationship with someone, but it's also having an emotional relationship. So this online activity with people is also an affair because it's a secret relationship, whether it be porn, whether it be chatting with an old high school girlfriend or boyfriend. If it's not shared with your primary partner, then that's falls under my definition of an affair. And so, do more men have affairs than women? Yes, but
Or do more men
maybe.
do more men get caught more. Because I feel
Yeah,
like
right.
women are more calculated. Like if she were to have an affair, she could hide her stuff. But I feel like men are a little bit more clumsy. So I don't know for a fact.
I don't know. I don't know
I don't
either.
know for a fact.
I
But
Yeah, but I mean, it affects, so many people, and so the decision on whether to be more public about the affair, if you're the one hurt, you're going to be wanting, especially you're going to want to tell your friends, "Oh my gosh, guess what happened to me?" and get a lot of
I feel like
validation
I
from
would
your
be too
friends.
ashamed to tell my friends though. I feel like I
Yeah,
would
I'm
be too
hearing that too.
ashamed because it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Just the thought of it is so embarrassing. So like, why would I want to share? I might eventually, but I feel like the first instinct wouldn't be to share. I'll just have to bury my head in shame, even though it had
Mhm.
nothing to do with me. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's what a lot of victims need to know because once this thing happens, they're questioning whether it's them, whether they don't look good enough, whether they don't look um I don't know, but I'm not a therapist, but I always say if somebody cheats, it's their fault. It has nothing to do with you. It's 100% their fault. But do you think that
That's
there's a
right.
root cause? Because you see cases where if you get caught, you are losing 50% of what you have. You could lose your family. You could lose like a lot, but you will still go ahead to choose this activity over saving your life. So, do you think that there's a deeper root cause of having an affair outside of your marriage or your relationship?
Well, the addictive part of an affair is that it's fun. It gets your hypothalamic, your brain chemistry is firing up all this dopamine, and it's a real high. It's a real high.
Hmm.
And like when you first fall in love with someone, you get obsessed with them. You can't think about anything else. They walk on the moon and you talk, talk, talk. And it kind of happens in affairs too. You feel good. You feel, oh my gosh, this person adores me, thinks I'm wonderful. And therefore the addictiveness of that is like, why would I walk away from this? I'm doing fine with my family at home. I'm still showing up at dinner and paying for the groceries and taking the kids to their ball games. I don't know. We find ways to rationalize what seems so irrational. And that's the humbleness of accepting our humanness. We all want to have fun. We all want to be feel needed and loved. We all want to have intimacy.
There's this butterfly feeling that you have when you're speaking with somebody for the first time that just it doesn't last so long. And when you're in a
Mhm.
relationship for a very long time, it's not you don't always get the butterfly, you don't always get that tingling feeling. So I can imagine why sometimes I'm not justifying having an affair. I would never do that. But I can imagine why sometimes a person might want to look out. But I think what they also need to understand that the same way the butterfly feeling died with your spouse, not died, but like got suppressed. It's the
Mhm.
same way it's going to happen with this person. So are you just going to keep hopping from one person to another? It's not sustainable, you know.
Yeah. Well, again, it's back to thinking, oh, be rational about this. But it's not rational. It's an emotional, desire. Lust, and it doesn't make sense. And we know this intellectually. Oh yeah, I remember 5 years ago when I started dating my husband. It was fabulous and wonderful. And now it's fine, but things are different. And so to get that, but so then I talk about in the book embracing your moral code. We are human. You are going to feel attracted to other people. Might be a little butterfly in a conversation that flutters in
Everybody,
your
is this
heart.
a known fact?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. So your moral code, when we looked at can we predict who makes it in marriage? Who lasts, who actually survives the years? And, yeah, it's good if they're good communicators, it's good that, but honestly, the only data that one researcher came up with was their commitment to the institution of marriage. In other words, you sign up for marriage and you say, you know, till death do us part, for thick and thin, I'm going to stick this out. Now, you hope people don't if it's abusive or there's addictions, whatever. But there is something about that. And then the moral code of right and wrong. Because again, we can all play with this like rationalizing, talking ourselves out of recognizing that because looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself, that's tough. It's tough. We want to think of ourselves as wonderful people, capable, competent, compassionate, whatever adjectives you want to come up with. But when we have actually mess up, when we sin, it's really hard to look ourselves in the mirror and admit it. And that's key to this repair. This is key to repairing your infidelity.
Can affairs be avoided?
Can affairs be avoided? Again, yeah, if your moral code, if you've got this clarity in your head that you are not going to step over that line, it kind of, there's certain people that are just more vulnerable to being flattered, to being uh, seduced, um, who are feel more privileged to pursue. And it kind of gets down to some personality types. So that's why also in the book, the second step, first step is empathy. You've got to really communicate that you get it, how much you've hurt other people,
Okay, now, so
and be
let's
able
talk
to,
about the 5 steps to deepen your apology since we're already
okay,
on it. So the first step is empathy.
yes,
Okay.
yes, empathy. And, that's certainly, and
Empathy on whose part
uh,
now?
the cheater. The cheater has to have empathy for the persons they've hurt because it's pervasive. It could be your spouse or your boyfriend, girlfriend, it could be your children, it could be your parents, it could be the person you cheated with, their family. I mean, not that you're going to go talk to all these people, but you have to have a deeper sense of the seriousness of your crime, of your sin to violate that. So that is key, and that sounds easy, but it's really tough. It's a really tough thing to communicate. And
Okay.
so the second step is the I call it navel gazing, like really looking inside yourself and trying to ask yourself some hard questions, like, is this a pattern with me that I like to push limits or push boundaries, or I have a weak moral code, or I'm susceptible to flattery? So that it's looking at your personality, your attachment issues, looking at understanding brain chemistry and what happens when we get um, wowed by someone or we're in the middle of lust. And then the fourth step is restitution. How are you going to change?
Third step.
Oh, I'm sorry. Third step. Thank you. Third step is say it out loud.
Okay.
Because so often people sin, violate trust, and they just keep it inside and they think, I'll just deal with it. But there's something very strong about the kind of the confessional aspect of saying it out loud. And you may or may not say it. Hopefully, obviously, you're going to say it to your significant other, but you need to pick a therapist, ideally. But if not, one good friend, who's one good friend at least, who will listen to you and be objective and not condemning, but allow you to kind of process things and talk things out and say things out loud. Because the more we don't talk out loud, the more we sit with our shame and our guilt, and then we get immobile. We can't make change. We can't make moves. So the fourth is restitution. Yeah, taking steps to make things different within yourself, and in your terms of how you act, your belief system, um, all those things. And then the last step is to ask for forgiveness. And we are so conditioned to say I'm sorry, and that's fine. You can say I'm sorry, but what are you sorry for? Why are you sorry? Say more. And so the coaching in this book is this kind of a way to get to saying I'm sorry in a way that says, hey, I've done this work. I've looked at myself. I own what I've done. And I now know these are my weaknesses, my faults. Here are the things that I know I need to work on. Here's why I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, it's up to the person you cheated on if they're going to accept it or not.
So empathy, navel gazing, say it out loud, restitution, and apology.
That's
Yeah,
yeah.
and then you have to do all of these things not knowing whether your apology is going to be accepted. I personally feel like if you genuinely do all of these things and your partner forgives you or takes you back, it's going to be hard to do it again because you've just put yourself through so much. And if you genuinely love yourself, you wouldn't want to go through, not this time, not even for your partner now, for your own dignity, if you have any.
Yeah.
I feel like you wouldn't want to put yourself through that again, knowing what you went through to solve the problem. But let's quickly
Yeah.
touch base on the personality types now, which you've spoken about.
Mhm.
What are the different personality
Mhm.
types?
Well, I'm sure you've taken some of those Myers-Briggs type tests and things like, are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Do you
I'm
need
sure I
structure? Do you
have.
have,
I think I have. I
yeah,
just
yeah,
have.
I'm sure you have. And yeah, are you outgoing? Do you, because the different, most, one statistic is that like 95% of us are extroverts. Anyway, we get our energy from connecting with other people, whereas that leaves just 25%, 5% of people that are introverts who find the world very noisy, and they need time to refuel. They need time alone, and there's um, no judgment of that. It's just the way we're kind of born. It's kind of innate with what's happening. I'm looking through my book here, 91.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so personality is, that's the thing. You're born a certain way? Are you a irritable person? Are you an anxious person? Are you prone to be more depressed? Are you an optimist? Are you a pessimist? Um, so you just kind of taking all, how open are you? How aware are you of yourself? And so there's a whole bunch of different ways to kind of look at it. Are you an energetic person? Are you kind of apathetic? Um, Outgoing? It's just that kind of thing, and seeing how that may or may not have affected your choice to have an affair and stay in an affair.
So do these things play a part in whether or not you have an affair, your personality traits?
Again, we have to step back and judge. We're taking the big picture. You're trying to understand yourself more. That's the journey here. Let me make some guesses, because psychology and mental health is about guesses. There's no like, this is the way you are. It's not that black white. It's a lot of shading happening. And of course, a lot of environmental experience. Like, did you come from a divorced home? What messages did you get from your parents about fidelity and marriage? I mean, there's just a lot. And so that's the process that typically you go through in therapy. Who are you? And so, okay, I'm an extrovert. How could that have contributed to my having an affair? Well, I really like people, so I really saw someone that had this great smile, and I just approached them, and the next thing I know, we're having a really open conversation because I'm an open person. And then down the road they went, accepting that, again, the moral code. They didn't say, oops, and oh, I remember my partner who's at home with the kids, or my partner who had to work late. Like, that's the thing about potentially what could lead you down the road is your own personality style, your own connectedness style. How do you connect with other people?
Are there cases where people just cheat just because they just cheat? They just nothing is wrong with the marriage, nothing is wrong with their partner. They just cheat.
Yeah, there is that belief that there's, once a cheater, always a cheater,
Is it true?
and if they don't do the work, yeah, if they don't recognize that this is hurting people, if they get away with it for a long period of time and therefore there's some fun and not having to pay any consequences, yeah, they probably would continue. They would probably continue. But would their primary relationship be a good relationship? No. There's going to be resentment. Again, the violated person may not have a clue what's happening exactly, but they know that they're not very happy, that their spouse isn't very present in that. So, but that's the other piece of working with the person who cheated. They are asked right away to negate, to condemn their relationship, when the reality is they probably got something positive out of the affair relationship. Can they talk with that about that to their spouse? Probably not. That's too painful. But for them to talk to a therapist, like, okay, who were you in this affair? How were you in this affair relationship? What parts of yourself did you like in this affair relationship? Well, I was more energetic. I was happier. I was more optimistic. I was more romantic. I was more engaging. Those are really great qualities for any relationship. So for them to really be able to process out loud what it is that they liked about themselves in their affair, and then, of course, see if they could transfer those qualities, those relationship qualities, to their primary relationship. Yeah, you're right. I hadn't picked a restaurant out to take my spouse in a long time. And yet in my affair, I was planning, planning, planning.
Hmm.
I never brought my partner flowers or candy, and yet I was always showering my affair partner with gifts. It's just for them to like, because they have to say it out loud,
Yeah.
to admit it, to admit it,
Yeah.
what how they could be different. Mhm. So that's the tough part because I know you're judging. I judge. It's really hard not to condemn completely the person having the affair if your goal is to help them change.
You judge them first and then help them.
Well, it's in my head. It's in my head, and that's the hard part, not to take sides. Like
Mm-hmm.
idiot, you were a
Mm-hmm.
jerk, you were, um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like if I was being cheated on, though, I would know. My guts would tell me. I feel like my guts, because my guts and I were like were connected, so I notice everything, and I also feel like maybe because I'm somewhat empathetic, and I can feel feelings, and that's why I'm very careful of what I surround myself with because I soak up stuff. So I would definitely know if somebody was playing with me.
yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
can a relationship go back to what it was before the affair? Exactly what it was before the affair. No?
You hope not. You hope not. Obviously, there was some door that was open that the person stepped through maybe not totally as a reaction to their primary relationship, but yeah, the relationship will change fundamentally forever. And so that's what the two people have to decide. How do we as a couple want to be different? How can we both get what we need from each other? And often it's so much goes back to intimacy
Mm-hmm.
that they can't be, and intimacy, of course, we all think of sex.
Mm-hmm.
But intimacy also means openness, um, interested in the other person, having good conversations, sharing some, spiritual values, sharing experiential values, that spiritual connection where you feel like you really are one with the person.
Yeah.
So there usually is the hope is that healing, it means, okay, my spouse had an affair 2 years ago. And now we're here, and guess what? We spend more time together. We have more fun together. We're more physically intimate with each other. We're more affectionate with it. I mean, hopefully, you get to retell the story of instead of my husband or my wife was a horrible, horrible, shitty person, or you can retell the story was my husband or wife made a mistake, and the good news is we grew from it.
So there are
I
cases
mean,
where people
that's
grow from it
oh yeah.
and they become better for it.
Yeah, I this one couple, she was just he had had multiple affairs, and he had a yeah, he was the horrible stereotypical, he had another woman, he had paid for her home and all this stuff, and she discovered it, and she's like, guess what? You're going to pay for this, and you're going to be the husband I need from you. And she was demanding, and she was in his face, and he went along with it. He was ready to be done with his double life. And they had much more fun in the bedroom afterwards. They went and said their vows again somewhere. They started traveling together. It really was a happy ending. And I would love to say it was because he, the cheater, had done all this work, but honestly, in this case, she pushed it. She demanded it. She was clear that she wasn't going to just walk away from their marriage. Yeah,
Which
it
is
was
usually the
impressive.
first step. Well, the first thing a person thinks when their partner or a spouse cheats is, I'm done with this marriage. Like, how dare
Yes.
you? Blah 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 blah. Um, yeah, but that's bold of her, though. I don't know that I would have taken that approach. I don't know that I would have taken, but then you never know until you're in the position. So I really do not
You
like.
don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know. And often people need to separate for a little bit. You know, either it's get a someone has to move out or they get a hotel room or they sleep on the couch in the basement. And yeah, sometimes it's just too painful to see each other. But this is not a read this book and you're done and you're going to be over it. But
Especially
it's
if they're like
process. It
kids,
takes.
if there are kids involved, it's
Mhm.
a whole different dynamic or a whole different ballgame. But
Yeah.
do you think moving out can make it worse? Because if they moved out and then you don't see them, it's, I don't know. What do you think?
I think I long ago I saw some statistic that yeah, moving out really accelerated the divorce. Yeah, you got it because there are some logistics of staying together, you know, and that make you feel like a couple. And once a person has another space, yeah, it's tougher. It's tougher. But you know, I have a chapter in the book about supporting the person that got hurt. I mean, they're angry. They're angry and they want them to feel their anger. They're hurt. They're sad. They're scared, and so for them to get all that, but also to give them permission to not make any rash, quick decisions, not quick decisions. You know, they can hang in there, but the challenge is somehow to fake it. And when you have children at home, you don't want them to really be part of the drama.
Mm-hmm.
So you decide what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you don't want to necessarily, in the perfect world, turn your children against
Yeah. Yeah.
the other person,
Yeah.
your partner. So that's really tough. Here you are in this huge drama, and you're still fixing lunch for school and saying, "Hi, honey, how are you? How was your day at school?" I mean, it's just hard. It's just so hard.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
The other day I was having a mental breakdown, kind of like a mental breakdown. I don't know whether to call it that because I had decided to work with this particular brand, and then later I found out that I undercharged, or I didn't demand as much as I should have, and so that made me very angry. So I was just in the corner of a room just having my breakdown, and then my son comes to ask for yogurt. And I just had to get up and then give him the yogurt. And I'm sure it's going to be the same in cases with divorce, where it's like you're crying your eyes out because your spouse cheated, but your child has to have lunch and you have to make the lunch for them. So
Mhm.
it must be a very, very difficult thing. But can forgiveness and reconciliation happen if the person who cheated doesn't even fully understand what they did?
Very easily. No,
No.
no. I mean, forgiveness selfishly. If you're the one that got wounded or cheated on, it's a heavy burden to be angry and to be sad. And so, yeah, to have forgiveness of the person, um, which basically is giving yourself permission to let go of the pain, of the sadness, of the anger, of the hurt. Yeah, that doesn't mean you're going to let them back in your life. You get to just kind of like detach, and that's which is interesting. Like working with couples, when one person is just quits feeling. It's one thing to be angry. That's you can kind of work with anger and sadness and hurt, but when the other person just becomes kind of indifferent,
Yeah, that's
that's
worse.
kind of telling that the marriage is really on a hard path to repair.
Okay, so
Yeah.
well, what are the signs that a relationship might be worth saving? And what are the signs that it might be
Mm.
time to walk away? Like, which one should you say, okay, I'm going to try and work for this, or I'm going to try and make this work? And which one should you say, I'm done? This is it.
That's a good question. What signs are there that the marriage is worth saving? Well, I mean, it can be logistic. It can be, we don't have enough money to support two households. and the children are young and they need two parents. It can be logistic, which sounds unemotional, but again, back to the commitment to your family is a value and important. The other signs that this is worth saving is again how remorseful, what's the desire, how how able are they to try? I mean, there's a trying factor here. Are you willing to try on both parts? Um, and so it's again, even for me as a therapist, there's no way of knowing who's going to come out on the other side and who's not.
Yeah.
I can make guesses, but I've been wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so
Hmm.
how can the person who's been betrayed begin to trust again without constantly feeling like, without constantly policing the relationship or checking the phones or having anxiety
Hmm.
or just being edgy because you've been hurt? How do they start to trust again?
Yeah. Yeah, because the policing is innate. It's going to happen at the beginning. You know, the person that cheated needs to show all their technology, all their passwords. You know, make sure there's no hidden phone. They need to just be really forthright about it, and they may be resentful that they know that someone's looking over their shoulder all the time. I mean, that's uncomfortable. We want to have our independence, but for the person who cheated, they have to get that for a time period they can't. They have to let go of that. But I think the naivete of thinking, oh, well, I need to get back to 100% trust. No, you don't. It's okay to have a little bit of distrust in any relationship because you don't want to get caught so, but shocked and betrayed that you had no clue this was coming. So it's okay when your little gut says, "What? Where were you last night? Wait, who were you just on the phone with?" It's really okay to give yourself permission to ask. But again, that's the thing about this. A couple may make it through the first year, 2 years of repair, but it will always be in the relationship. 20, 30, 40 years later, they're going to see something on television about an affair. You're going to hear something at church about betrayal, and it's going to both come in both your heads. Now, what do you do with that? Well, I don't want couples to say, well, yeah, I got the hotel room 3 times, and yeah, her favorite perfume was it. I mean, I don't want them to do that. I just want them to be able to say, ouch, were you thinking about that affair I had 10 years ago? Yes, I was. Yeah, me too. I'm really, really sorry. I really regret. That's the conversation.
Yeah.
And then you go on. It's like the elephant in the living room. It's always going to be there.
Yeah.
And you have to acknowledge that at times.
Can you cheat and be 100% in love with your partner? Like you love them, but you still went ahead and you cheated.
Some couples tell me they are. It's hard to, again, what is love and
Like they said
what
so.
does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they said so. Right, right. Yeah, I mean, that's what gets crazy, especially with online affairs, where it's just chatting and there's no physical interaction. The person that they're chatting with may live in 5 states away or another country, but it's still cheating because it's a secret and they're having more intimacy, maybe on an emotional level, with this person than they are with the person they're living with. And so it's really key that you again you got your boundaries, you have your moral code that says this is right, this is wrong. If anytime you feel like you have to hide something, you need to ask yourself, why am I hiding this? And that's hard because especially in people, especially in second relationships or second marriages, where an affair happened in the first one, people get scars. They get emotional scars. And so for them to be able to assume good news and assume trust, that's tough sometimes for individuals. Or by nature, their personality styles are very anxious or worried a lot. And so it's again trying to be honest with who you are and how you are, but also how to communicate and assume goodwill, but also you can be 5-10% distrustful.
Yeah. There are a lot of people in this situation, but not everybody can afford a therapist, right? And so the first step would be to get your book. To get
Thank
your
you.
book,
Yes.
to the 5 steps to deepen your apology after you
Hmm.
commit an infidelity. It's on Amazon and it's on everywhere you buy your books. So you can start with that, and I'm sure that it would be a great start. But before we round up, I quickly wanted to ask, what myths about cheating do you think actually cause more harm than good when couples are trying to heal?
What makes it harder for couples to heal?
No,
Is that
what
what you-
myths, like myths, are there any myths about cheating that actually causes more harm than good? Like things that people, you know, how an example is once a cheater, always a cheater, and now know that it's not a myth, for instance, because you've clarified that. So, are there any other sayings or any other myths that just make it like more difficult for couples to heal?
Not that I can think of, but I think we kind of both talked a little bit about the fact that, you are ashamed. Both parties tell friends and family about what happened. And that kind of affects this third step, which is say it out loud. If you're not confessing what you've done to everybody, which I'm not saying you should, but it makes it tougher to be more honest and open
Mm-hmm.
because you're not really being truthful, completely truthful with everyone. So you have to pick your inner circle and decide. But I want the cheater to feel guilty. I want them to acknowledge they messed up, take responsibility for what they've done to themselves and to others. But the shame thing, that's the tough one. And the difference between guilt and shame is when you just believe that you are. I'm always a cheater. I will always cheat. I'm a terrible person. That's called shame. And that's hard to repair shame. You can repair guilt by actions and change.
Hmm. Interesting. Dr. Deborah
Mhm.
Miller, I've had such an insightful conversation with you today. Is there any question that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? That you feel like we should have spoken about today, but we haven't touched base on?
Um, I think we did a good job. I just kind of want to leave your listeners with the expectation that people can change. Maybe that's the mean. People can change. And it's hard work. It takes courage. It takes humility. It takes openness and honesty. But, you know, I'm sure some of your listeners are the cheaters themselves, and they have to figure out how to deal with accepting that about themselves, accepting that piece of themselves while not making it consume them. But people can change.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been a great
Thank
conversation, as I said. And that's
Well,
what we
I really
all,
appreciate the opportunity.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
If people want to reach out to you, you have a website, right?
Yes.
Which is,
www.drdebmiller.com.
yes,
drdebmiller.com. DRDEBMILLER.com.
yeah, because
Yeah,
I'm
I'd love
sure
to hear from
there are going to be some people who need your services, I hope.
them.
And I'm sure that they'll be able to reach you through those means. Thank you so much, Dr. Deborah Mila. It has been an insightful conversation. That's going to be
Thank you,
all
Mory.
for today, guys. Until next time, it's bye bye.